Awesome. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm Paige. I'm an alcoholic and so grateful to have you guys here. And so where we're going to be picking up today, we are on page 51. And we're in the chapter, We Agnostics. And so we're diving into step 2, which is really exciting. If you're leading step 2 this week, yeah, we got you. We got you going. So page 51. Welcome, everyone. First full paragraph. So it goes on to say, this world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than in all the millenniums which went before. Now, I don't know if you guys remember last week, but we were talking about the spiritual judo or the spiritual jujitsu that happens in this chapter, where we're going to use logic and reason to flip us on why we should open our minds to the belief that there could be a power greater than ourselves. And this is one of those judo, jujitsu sort of paragraphs. You can tell I don't quite know the difference between which martial art is which. I don't know which one is chopping, which one is grappling, and which one is flipping. Prepare to be spiritually flipped. Oh, yeah. You unmute? Yeah. Okay.
There you go. If you can make me co-host, that'd be great.
Forgot to do that. I normally am on top of it. This week,
you're doing good, and I didn't want to stop you, but I might
all
need
good.
to do something here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Make co-host. I gotcha. Eyes on it. We're on top of it. Alrighty. So, the world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than in all of the millenniums which went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. And so, like, what are we talking about? Because when I would read this, especially the first few times on my own, I'm like, what the heck does this have to do with my alcoholism? Like, what does this have to do with anything? And so what we're saying is that in the world of the material, we as a society, as a humanity, we have made tremendous progress. And when it talks about students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today, what we're saying is, I'm not smarter than Aristotle. I do have Google, but I'm not smarter than the best intellect of ancient times. But so people today, like if we were to hop into a time machine and time travel back to ancient times, to the Mayan civilization, to ancient Rome or ancient Greece or to even the medieval ages, we would pop there and wouldn't be smarter than anyone. And they would shortly be unimpressed with our magical cell phones because we wouldn't have a way to charge them. So that would last for a moment. And so I'm not smarter than them. So it's saying, okay, well, if in ancient times they were about as smart as we were, why wasn't there this growth? So it says, yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. So this idea of researching, experimenting, trying theories, like coming up, like science, that idea of like challenging old ideas, seeking a new experience, that was not a thing. It says in the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas, old ideas. So, what are we talking about? The judo flip has not happened yet, and welcome, we're on page 51. The judo flip hasn't happened yet, but if we can look ahead, we can see what is about to commence. We can see the flip that's just about to happen, because back in ancient times, material progress was being held back by old ideas, superstition, tradition. We didn't try new things. We weren't curious. We didn't research. We didn't experiment. And as a result, humanity did not grow in terms of science. Prepare for that to be flipped on its head as it pertains to issues of spirituality. That's what it's saying. So, it says some of the contemporaries of Columbus thought a round earth preposterous. And so and to be fair, people did know the earth was round, and that wasn't something Columbus had proved. But Bill Wilson, he was educated in a system where he had learned that Columbus had proved the earth was round. And so what is the takeaway from this? Well, the takeaway from this is, even though it wasn't fully historically accurate, that people believed that the world was flat. And then Columbus ended up in the Caribbean and proved that it was round. So we believed, no, there is no way the earth is flat. There is no way that could happen. And then we were given some evidence that the earth could be round. And we as a society were able to change our minds. We're able to open our minds, just as we may do with the realm of the spirit. So it goes on to say, others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies. Now, Galileo, he was an astronomer, and he was an astronomer at the time where the church ran the whole show. And before Galileo had come up with his ideas and his theories based on the evidence that he saw before him, we as a society believed that the earth was the center of the universe. Sound perhaps a little familiar? As if I am the center of the universe, right? Just gonna throw that here. I know that nobody at this lovely big book study ever thought at any point that they were the center of the universe. But what happened is Galileo was studying the stars and the orbit and the sun, and what he realized is, no, the earth is not the center of the universe. What is at the center but the sun? And the universe revolves around the sun. And they're like, Galileo, you can't say that. We're going to kill you if you don't knock that stuff off. I mean, I'm loosey-goosey with the history on that. But that's a lot like our spiritual journey. I show up to AA thinking I'm the center of the universe. Now, I'll be honest with you. I didn't come into Alcoholics Anonymous. Here I am. I have arrived. Deal with my alcoholic shenanigans. No, that's not what happened. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous thinking that I was the biggest piece of garbage that ever lived. And I was a scourge on humanity. But where does that still put me? At the center. And so what do we do in Alcoholics Anonymous? Well, my experience is I take a course of action. And that course of action allows me not to be at the center, but God to be at the center. And I love that it is the sun that is at the center of the universe, that light. And we see the metaphor for God as light all throughout this book. God as light. And so what do I need? I need God, light, power at the center, and I've got to rotate, orbit, orientate myself around. And in fact, last week where we left off at the very bottom of the first paragraph on 51, when it says, when many hundreds of people are able to say the consciousness of the capital B presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives. That central fact, the center, is this power. And if that's not your experience here today, that's okay. But that's where we're going. That's where we're going. At this point in step 2, all I just got to believe is that Galileo had better things to do than try to piss off the church and get thrown in the gallows or whatever it was, and that he had that experience. And that's what we're doing. We're just believing that the people who have come before have better things to do, not me, obviously, but other people have better things to do than lie about their experience. So we asked ourselves this, so we got to ask ourselves this question. Are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? So am I being just as biased, just as unreasonable about spiritual things as back in the day they were about science and inquiry and invention and material growth? Am I as close-minded about spiritual growth? Has that not been my experience? And it goes on to say, even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? Was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proven man could never fly? Man, if you're like me, I'm like, what? What does the airplane have to do with the fact that I can't stop myself from drinking? Like, what does this have to do with it? And so I'll explain the history, but I'll explain, and I'll do it very briefly, the spiritual metaphor. And so the history is, there was this guy, and his name was Professor Langley. And, page 51. 51, and we're right at the bottom, right where Kitty Hawk kind of stands out. And Kitty Hawk, now I know many of you are in South Carolina, so you guys are going to have the probably idea that the Kitty Hawk is in North Carolina, but for some reason I'm very persnickety about that geography in particular. Somebody needs to write inventory. Me, I did, don't worry about it. But Professor Langley, so he was this great scientist, and he was given the task by the U.S. government to develop essentially a machine that could fly. And so he was given $50,000 by the U.S. Army. And some of you might be like, hey, wait a minute, why did the Army give him money? Why didn't the Air Force? Because they didn't have an Air Force. You got to have an airplane first. So they gave Professor Langley $50,000, and he was up in Washington, D.C., and he had all the money, all the resources. He had all these scientists working under him, and he was putting all this effort into it. And he finally built, and I'm going to see if I can screen share this. He finally built, I'll put me in the corner. He finally built what is known as, I've got to move that. There we go. He built the aerodrome. And so that which I'm just going to throw out there. We could have had an aerodrome instead of an airplane. And I think that is a way cooler thing. Now, I like airports, but for those of you that don't like traveling, imagine you get to go to the aerodrome port. It sounds all fancy and futury. But he built his aerodrome, and it was all put together, and everyone's there watching what's going to happen. And so it gets like catapulted off this, I think it was strapped onto a boat. And if people are reading, they're probably getting the actual information. But it was like strapped, and it was like catapulted to be sent up into the air. And you can see in that picture, the trajectory is going about as well as my life. You know, it's not an ascension. We're not like, woohoo, I had arrived. Ooh, it's not looking good. And then it crashes into the Potomac River. And that's the river that they're at. And for those that aren't geographically inclined, the Potomac is just a river that goes through Washington, D.C. And then they had to get rescued. And after that happened, they were absolutely convinced man could never fly. We put all that money, all that power, all the resources that we had into building this aerodrome, and to building this, and it crashed. So the logical conclusion is that man could never fly. Now let's have a look at our own experiences. I won't go into it as detailed as I often do. Sometimes I do a big book bounce around all about Professor Langley. Now, Professor Langley, I don't know if he was a bad guy, and doing shady things, but as far as I know, he was a good guy, lovely guy. But I use him as a stand-in for self-will. So don't think, I'm not judging him. I haven't built an airplane, But Professor Langley is a beautiful stand-in for self-will. And you see, I don't know about you guys, but I would try to self-will that physical allergy. You know what I mean? I would try to self-will to control the amount that I drank, to drink like a lady, to drink with impunity. And all the self-will, all the resources, all the things I tried to control my drinking. Well, I landed right in the Potomac River of my life. It crashed and burned. And then what would I do? I would use self-will against the mental obsession. And I would try to stay sober my way, try different things to put between me and the first drink. And I would try things, and I was doing it, and I was throwing all my resources at self-will. And I crashed into the bottom of the Potomac again with my life. And so for me, I used Professor Langley as a stand-in for self-will because it did not work. And so up at that point in history, as a society, man could never fly. And it's going to say, had not people said that God had reserved this privilege to the birds? So no, man could never fly. And then what happened? 2 bicycle repairmen in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, and the Wright brothers, they built an airplane. And this airplane, it flew for only like 7 or 11 seconds that first flight. I mean, it flew for not even as long as some of the major airplanes that we have in the world today. But from that moment, we changed our mind. Not only could man fly, but more than that. And we'll talk about more than that here in a second as I keep reading. But what I want to emphasize is we changed our mind. And the Wright brothers are men of faith. They have faith. Now, faith without works is dead. We see that theme all through. So I can have faith in an airplane, but if I don't glue the wings together, hopefully we're using something stronger than glue. Actually, I'm not an airplane expert, but probably more than glue or duct tape. Welding, probably. But if I don't put the airplane together, I'm not going to have the airplane. But in this moment, all we need to believe is that flight is possible because we see it. We see it. I see it in you, those of you who have recovered, that you have found, spoilers, another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation. So can I change my mind that my way does not work? I keep crashing into the Potomac, but there could be another way. And maybe what I've got to do is try what the Wright brothers have done. So it says, had not people said that God has reserved this privilege to the birds? Only 30 years later, the conquest of the air was almost an old story, and airplane travel was in full swing. To go from man could never fly to 30 years later, I mean, Bill and Abby are chartering an airplane to complete a jag. It's an old story, of course. Now watch what happens from that place of maybe man could fly. Another way to look at it is maybe I was wrong. Ooh, we don't like that one. That little seed of maybe there could be a solution. We see this opening up of our minds. And here's what it says. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed a complete liberation of our thinking. So all those old ideas are gone. Those superstitions, it's gone. And it says, show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he will say, I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. Now, I live in Alberta, and for our Albertans, of which we have at least 2, y'all know that we don't have longshoremen. It's because we don't have a shore. Because, if you ask in Alberta, we don't really know what longshoremen are. I'm sure those of you who are on coastal regions are like, girl, who doesn't know that? But just in case, a longshoreman is a blue-collar dock worker, somebody who's taking stuff off and on the ships. That's what a longshoreman is. And so what it's saying is show any average blue-collar worker, and then when it says Sunday supplement, some of you guys remember what a Sunday supplement is, but for anyone who doesn't, the Sunday newspaper was always the thickest newspaper. It always had the most stuff. And the supplement would be these extra stories, or an extra story that would go into the Sunday newspaper. And you could also buy it separately. So if you've ever seen any old-timey media where you got the little newspaper boy who's like, extra, extra, read all about it. The extra that he's trying to sell us is the Sunday supplement. So it's like any sort of like, see any TikTok video of, like just an easy digestible piece of media. So what they're saying is this belief is not fancy scientists who know how to do rocket science. I was working with somebody yesterday who's like, it's not rocket appliance, Paige. I'm like, that toaster's on fire. Woo! But that idea that an average person, not in high intellect, but just one of us, is so open that, yeah, not only is airplane, I bet we'll get to we'll get to the moon. No doubt. Maybe not even long. That's how open the mind got. And that's the same journey I've got to make on the spiritual journey. Now, all I can start with is that you guys are flying and I don't got it. You know what I mean? I see you guys in air. And actually, oftentimes I joke that, like, really what's asked of me is to not show up to the Calgary International Airport and like gaslight the airline employees and be like, no. I know that like flying works for you and that you think airplanes are things, but I don't believe in them. They don't work for me. You know what I mean? That's all I'm asked to do is just not gaslight airline employees. But it's like that with the spiritual journey. So, and it says, I bet they do it, maybe not so long either. Is not our age characterized by the ease with which we discard old ideas for new, by the complete readiness with which we throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new which does? And what is the truth? The truth is my way doesn't work. My theory and my ideas is not working because I cannot stay sober and I have to stay sober. But deeper than that, we're going to have a look in this next paragraph at the spiritual malady. And this is kind of one of the first times in a long time that I've really spoken about the spiritual malady. So how we diagnose alcoholism is we look at the allergy of the body that once I start, I cannot stop. And we look at the obsession of the mind, that thought that I have when I am sober that takes me back again and again and again to that first drink. But we don't focus in step one so much on the spiritual malady. And the reason is in step one, what I see in the book, what we're focusing on is what separates us from other people. What separates me from non-alcoholics. Because there are non-alcoholics, who are spiritually sick. There are not, and you guys know I'm going to make that joke. You can find them at your HOA, your PTA, find them at the grocery store, I'm sure that everyone is spiritually a delight in traffic in South Carolina. But here in Alberta, we got some spiritually sick people on the roads. And nobody here that it would ever be spiritually sick while driving. Nobody here. No. And so it says we had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. So the spiritual malady is part of the human condition. But it is important for us to understand that is what we are treating in Alcoholics Anonymous. We are treating the spiritual malady because when that spiritual malady, that conscious sense of separateness from God, when that hole in the depth of my soul is filled, I no longer have the obsession of the mind that tells me to take that first drink. And if I no longer have the obsession of the mind, I'm not going to take that drink. That would be insane. And if I don't take that drink, I don't set off the allergy. And so the spiritual malady is what it is like for us to live with that conscious sense of disconnect from God. Now, I didn't know that's what it was when I got here. I wasn't like, oh, I am acutely aware of a sense of disconnect from the infinite power of the universe. No, I just knew I was miserable and crawling out of my own skin. And it's important to understand that that's what's happening at root. Because a lot of times we put down the drink and we don't get better. Somebody like me, I put down the drink and I get worse. And so I got to find a treatment for that. I don't know about you, but alcohol gives me ease and comfort. and I will sell my soul piecemeal by piecemeal by piecemeal to just get a little sip of that ease and comfort. That's what I'm after. And so I've got to find a way to find that ease and comfort sober. And I got some bad news. I tried a whole lot of other stuff and that didn't work. So if you're like me, it's going to have to be a spiritual awakening as the result of the 12 steps. But hopefully you're not like me. I have a feeling, though, if we're hanging out on a Wednesday, you just might be, and I'm glad you're here. I love you. All right, so these are what are called the bedevilments. And they are a beautiful breakdown of the spiritual malady. And the spiritual malady, I want to point something out. I experienced this sober. The drink is down, and this is how I feel sober. So, is this my experience? We were having trouble with personal relationships. Was I having trouble, or am I today having trouble? Some of you are like, girl, I am not prepared to be called out this heavily at this hour. Feel free to just tune me out for a little bit. But were we having trouble with personal relationships, or are we having trouble with personal relationships now? Now, is that my experience now? We couldn't control our emotional natures. Mood swings. We're a little emotionally all over the place. I know that wouldn't pertain to any of you, but is that was that my experience? And is that my experience today? It says we were a prey to misery and depression. And what we're talking about there is the sense of misery and depression that's on me. You know, I think about it like I'm trying to do like biology. Like I'm a little herbivore running around eating grass and berries. And then there's like a big like carnivore that's coming to get me. But then I'm trying to outrun and I can't. I don't know why I'm a little anxious bunny of misery and depression. And there's like a coyote after me. And really, that prey to misery and depression, it's got me and I can't get loose. Misery and depression. Did I have that misery on me, that depression on me, and I couldn't break loose? Or do I have that now? Is that my current experience? We couldn't make a living. Now, is that my current experience? Now, I'm going to throw that out in a number of different ways. Not making a living can look a number of different ways. That doesn't necessarily mean I am unemployed, but it can. It can look like I hop from job to job to job and I can't seem to hold down a job. It can look like I'm underemployed. It can look like I'm spending money faster than it's coming in. It can look like every single day is a drudgery and a misery and I hate my job and I hate my life. Couldn't make a living. Does that sound familiar? Is that our experience? It said we had a feeling of uselessness. Uselessness. Is that my experience? We were full of fear. Is that my experience? Was that my experience? Is that my experience today? We were unhappy. Is that my experience? It goes on to say we couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Man, that one got me. Because I wanted to be of help to people. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to be helpful. But I just could not seem to do that. Was that my experience? Is that my experience today? And it says, was not a basic solution to these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. Is it not more important that I find a freedom from living in this place full of fear and misery and can't make a living and depression and anxiety and I just can't escape myself and I can't help others and it's awful? Isn't that more important than the next rocket launch that they have? Isn't that more important than the next iPhone that comes out? And some of you are like, no, I think that next iPhone will fix me. Couldn't make a living. And so that's what we need to treat, because those are the symptoms of having a conscious sense of separateness from God. And I just want to share with you something that I had made. There we go. Let me see if I can do it so that hides sidebar And then let me see if I can make it just a little bit bigger. So these, hold on, I'll do the second one because this is a better one. These are how the bedevilments on page 52 line up with the 9th step promises. So when on page 52 it says we were having trouble with personal relationships, well, in the middle of the 9th step promises, we will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellow self-seeking will slip away. It makes sense that if I'm showing up to relationships focused on what I can give, how can I help, they'll probably go better. We couldn't control our emotional natures. The emotions are all over the place. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. That sounds like some freedom for that. We were a prey to misery and depression. And it says our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. We couldn't make a living. Well, in 9th step, fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We had a feeling of uselessness. Well, that feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We were full of fear. Well, we go from full of fear to knowing intuitively how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We were unhappy. We are going to, and in step 9, partway through making our amends, we are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people, and there's 2 things that apply to that. It says we will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it because we will see how our experience can benefit others. It says no matter how far down the scale we've gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. And so if I want, and the reason I made that because I have some friends who just love the bedevilments and they're positively bedeviled. They just love them. And so I made that little, I saw a visual and I made that visual off of the visual that had been previously made. And if I want to not feel how I'm feeling, part of why I brought that visual up, and I'll throw it in the WhatsApp chat if I remember after the meeting. But part of the reason we're looking at that is because if we're here today and we're like, yes, that's me. 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 And not even that was me. That is me today. And if you want relief from that, if you want freedom from it, well, the book is going to tell us how. What do I have to do? Where do I have to go? Well, it is halfway through making my amends, before I am halfway through making my amends, that the 9th step promises happen. So the solution to these bedevilments happen as the result of the 12 steps. If I want emotional sobriety, I've got to do a 4 through 9. That's what I've got to do. That's the action that I got to take. And like keep it rocking and rolling with 10, 11, 12, absolutely. But man, if it's on me, let's 4 through 9 this. So I wanted to just, that's what we do. That's how we get freedom. So it says, when we saw others solve their problems. 2 things I want to point out. Solve. That's what's on offer. Solve. Not, well, maybe it'll get a little bit better if you keep holding on. You know, this too shall pass. It might pass like a kidney stone. No. Solve. But what is interesting is it's not solve our problem, but our problems, plural. You see, in my experience, that there is not a problem that I cannot take to God, and how I take it to God, how I let God, is I take it through the tangible actions of the 12 steps. I take it through the process of 4 through 9. That is how I give it to God. That is how I let God. That is how I let God work. That is what solves my problems, and I go and help other people. That is what we do. And it says by a simple reliance. And that's how I rely. Again, 4 through 9, keeping it rocking and rolling with 10, 11, 12. That's how I rely on this thing. Upon the capital S, capital U, Spirit of the universe. We had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. So what opens us up to the idea that there could be a power is I come to rooms like this with people like you. And there is a smile, and there is a joy, and there is a laughter, and you guys are wearing the world like a loose garment, and you have something. You have something that I do not have. And maybe, just maybe, I can believe that what happened to you could happen to me if I take the actions that you take. That's it. I don't have that power. I don't have that airplane, but I can see what I've got is not working. But you've got something that works. Why don't I try that? So the Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. So they had to start with faith. They had to start with the idea that there could be a machine that could fly. That's where we start. Without that, nothing could have happened. Now again, we're seeing the results of men who have faith. But throughout this book, there is a thread and there is a theme. We do not have faith by itself. It is faith without works is dead. So I need faith and I need action. So I can believe in the airplane, but I've got to build the airplane. And I'm just going to throw it out there. 2025, we got some blueprints. We got blueprints. Spoilers. The Big Blue Book is the Big Blue Blueprints. I didn't think about that before I said it. I didn't think it was going to be quite the tongue twister it became. That took what little cognitive ability I had. Little brain cells were working real hard on that one. But that is the blueprint. So if I follow those directions, I will get the results. I got to have faith there is one. But again, 2024, I see you guys all flying around with your spiritual airplanes, happy and free and joyous. And I just got to put it together. Now, if you had to build your own airplane, do you think you would gloss over the instructions? Like, I'm sure you guys don't, a piece of IKEA furniture? Would you be like, what's this little extra nuts? Whatever, extra bolts, it's fine. Good enough. Duct tape. No, an airplane I gotta get in? Like, I am following those directions. I am precision. And that's what we're doing. And that's why we go through this book. And that's why at this study, we're going through line by line so that we get the directions, so that we don't have a couple screws loose at the end of it. That I didn't, where'd the marbles go? We're missing them. We want to have all the things in place, airplane, we're going, that's what we're after. So, and it says, without that, nothing could have happened. So we start with belief, and that's what step 2 is. There could be something. Without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve our problems when others showed us that God's sufficiency worked with them. So we saw that God's sufficiency working in your lives. And again, it's a reminder that if I have recovered, I do have a responsibility. To those that are standing at the landing field, and are miserable and don't know if an airplane could exist, I've got to be a demonstration of this power. I've got to be I got to show others that this works in my life, not by lying about it, but by living this way of life as a demonstration. So we began to feel like those who had insisted the Wrights would never fly. And I'm sure nobody here has ever had this experience. But have you ever been sitting on, like, usually step 4, but maybe step 9, and you're sitting there, and as you're sitting on it, like, it gets scarier and scarier and scarier and scarier, and you're just trying to avoid it. And then you have somebody that started that 4th step or the amends at the same time you did, and they just, they're flying by you, and you can see, man, they were just as miserable as I am, and look at them. That stupid jerk, because I'm still miserable in this story. That stupid, happy, but they have a joy, and we can see that it works. We can see that it works. So it's like we're sitting there miserable. Oh, the Wrights could never fly. This God stuff couldn't work. And somebody's like, wee, I'm not miserable anymore. Yeah. So it says, and so now. So that was like the big airplane jujitsu, judo move that got us to flip and change our minds. And here's another one. Because what is a common argument about this idea of God? It's not logical. I'm not into that spiritual stuff. I'm here for logic. And so the book is going to meet us where we're at and judo flip us where we need to go. It says logic is great stuff. We like it. We liked it. We still like it. It is not by chance that we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses and to draw conclusions. And when we say it is not by chance, that's a sneaky little, it's probably by God that we are given logic and reason. We're not asking you to throw out logic and reason. We like it, we use it, and it is important to be able to examine the evidence of our senses and to come to conclusions. Logic is important. It says, that is one of man's magnificent attributes. We, agnostically inclined, would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we're at pains. We're almost begging you, hey, please, to tell why our present faith is reasonable, why we think it more sane and logical to believe than not to believe. Why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands and down and said, we don't know. And what we're talking about there is we are holding on to this idea of logic and reason as our life is crumbling around us. And we are seeing evidence. Well, that's one of the things I love about Alcoholics Anonymous, is it is verifiable. We can run it as an experiment. I was asked to fill in at one of Howard's Big Book studies, and he said, you can do what you want. Well, I took some liberties with that. And so the whole talk I did, it was called Ineffable McSchmeffable. And he just called it a Big Book bounce around because he didn't want to have to spell that. But the whole thrust of that, ineffable means to be experienced. Where we went through this book and we spoke about the experiences that I need. And we kicked that Big Book bounce around off with that idea that if I don't think I'm an alcoholic, and more about alcoholism, it gives me 2 experiments that I can run. Try some controlled drinking, try it more than once, 3 drinks, stop for 24 hours, do that again and again, see what happens. Or just don't drink for a year. Just don't drink for a year. And that's to test whether I have the mental obsession. I don't have to read the book. I can just run that experiment. And I can do the same with God. I got to believe that there could be something, or at least enough to try to test it. But I can run these 12 steps as an experiment. And here's what I found. I've been doing this for just over 15 years. And as a result of that, I have seen a lot of people relapse. I've seen a lot of people come and go. I've seen a lot of people get stalled out and drink again. I've seen a lot of people not start the process. I've even seen some people have spectacular recoveries and stop doing the work as a way of life. And I've watched the erosion until they took a drink again. But I have never. And I'm not, listen, I didn't have a spreadsheet. I would, because I think Excel is pretty neato, but I've never had a spreadsheet. But I have truly never, ever seen anyone fully engaged in this thing relapse. I've just never seen it. Actually doing it, where they've made all their amends, they've done their 4 and 5, they've made their amends, they're living in 10, 11, 12, they're actually doing the deal, they're growing in this. I've never seen it. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I'm not saying my experience is the totality of everyone's experience. But what I'm saying is, isn't that more sane and logical than to try that which we can look at and see that doesn't work? Things like, I'll just go to meetings. I'll just get into a relationship. You know what I mean? We see that does not work. So we're saying it's not logical, it's not reasonable, but the evidence is this way makes way more sense than all the things that sound like it's logic, it sounds like it's reasonable, and I still get drunk or I want to kill myself. Why don't we try this? Even if it sounds mushy, it works. And now what we've got is this next paragraph is what I like to call the second step proposition. Also, step 2, part 2, if that is easier to write in your book, rather than second step proposition. I don't know what's up with the tongue twisters today. I just really hope we don't have to sell seashells by the seashore, because I don't know if I could do that today. I'm from Alberta. We don't have shore or sea or seashells. All right. So second step proposition. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade. Rude to call us out like that. Self-imposed, accurate, and hurtful. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he's nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? And that, man, I just believe that maybe you guys weren't lying about your experience. You want to hit me with some theology? What? God is everything or else God is nothing? Like, whoa, what are we talking about? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen. And step 2, I break down into 2 parts. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves. So step 2, part 1, I had to believe that there could be a power greater than myself. And we saw that on page 47, where it said, do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? And here we are at step 2, part 2, could restore us to sanity. So we can take this question and we can reconcile it. We can soften it as a start. Is it possible that this power could remove from me the mental obsession? Because that is the sanity that I need to be restored to. The insanity of alcoholism is the mental obsession. So can I believe that this power can take away the mental obsession? That's it. Can I believe that? Another way to look at it is, what do I think is bigger? The spirit of the universe. I'm going to softball this question. The spirit of the universe that underlies the totality of things, or my rinky-dink problem with booze. What do I think is bigger? See, I softballed it, right? And so if I can say, you know what? It seems that God has restored your sanity. Maybe that could be my experience. God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe. Maybe that could be my experience. Maybe this power is more powerful than my alcoholism. Okay, that is step 2. But then it says, God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What is our choice to be? And it pegs me right between the eyes. I can't escape that question. It asked me that question, so I should answer that question. And so how do we reconcile this question? And this is how I reconcile it. Let's take a moment and think about our own history, our own drinking careers, our own lives. And is your experience like my experience? Do you have moments where you should not be alive, but here you are alive today based on seconds and inches? And is your experience like my experience, where not only should I not be alive, but I should not be sober? And here I am, sober and alive today, based solely on seconds and inches. Has that been our experience? And if that has been our experience, is it possible that God could be involved in that? And another thing that we can look at, and if you want, you don't have to, but if you close your eyes, and if you can think of a moment in your life where you've had that experience of oneness. For those that are by the ocean, you know, when the waves are crashing and there's this beautiful sunset and it just takes your breath away and you're in the here and now, and there's a connectedness to the greater world. For those of us in Alberta, we might experience that when we're driving into the mountains, and it's like the mountains just come out from nowhere and we're surrounded by that majesty and that awe, and I'm a part of something. Those moments, if you ever held like a newborn in your eyes and been captivated by the majesty of the universe in that moment? Have we ever had a time where there has been a peace and a presence of something beyond ourselves that we felt when we didn't need to feel it, when we shouldn't have felt it, and it was there with us all along? Have we had even one moment of that? Now, if you can say yes, then we cannot say that God isn't. And even if you're here today and you're like, Paige, I don't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know what I was looking for. But if you can believe that there are people here today who have had those experiences of seconds and inches, those experiences of the consciousness of the presence of God, and if you can believe that experience, then we cannot say that God isn't. Because if God isn't, God is nothing. We must say that God is. because we've had these experiences. And if we are left to say that God is, we must come to the conclusion that God is everything. And that is how we reconcile and move through that question. But I'll tell you, I was like, oh boy, that's a big one when I got here, you know. And it says, and this is the book meeting us where we're at. Bear with me, because it says, arrived at this point, God is everything, God is nothing. We've crossed, just so you know, we've crossed bridge to shore. We've done it. Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. It's there. God is everything else, God is nothing. We couldn't duck the issue. Also, I have this thing, and I joke about it with sponsees. If you are struggling with the idea that there could be a God, or there could be a loving God. Now, this is silly, but bear with me. Just remember that ducks' feet are orange. They're orange. There's no reason for that. That is delightful and whimsical. Only a loving God would do that. Have you ever heard duck run on like ice or on floor? It is the best. So you can't tell me there's no God. Duck's feet are orange. Anywho, I don't need any other duck facts. I've got them. But we couldn't duck the issue. So this question, it pegged us. We couldn't avoid this question. Some of us had already walked over the capital B, capital R. See, remember, as we go through, we see words that are capitalized very much in this chapter, but we see it throughout the book. And almost every word that is capitalized, not everyone, but almost everyone, are synonyms for God. Higher power, creator, spirit of the universe. A word to point to that power that we're after. That relationship that we need to build. So bridge of reason. Now keep in mind, I'm not saying bridge of reason is a good God, but I made it God. I was relying on the God of my reason and of my intellect, and we were using that to build a bridge from the hopelessness of my alcoholism towards this hope that there could be a solution. And it says towards the desired shore of faith. That idea, maybe there could be a power. And it says the outlines of and promise of the capital N, capital L, new land. Somewhere completely new that I haven't been before. Had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. That idea that we're walking towards this and we see the outlined. You know, if I really have not been on many boats, but you can kind of like you fly in and you can see like the city just come into view. We're seeing the outline of there could be something. I haven't been there. I haven't visited. I haven't experienced it, but I'm seeing that there could be something, and it's bringing me towards that new land. And that is bringing that luster, is that shine and fresh courage, like that luster to the tired eyes. So there's hope. There's hope as we approach it. It says, friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. And that is those of us who had recovered. I got to have my hand out to the newcomer. Ought to be friendly while I do it, but I got to have my hand out to the newcomer, reaching, saying, come on. We're here to help. We're here to help. And it says, we were grateful that capital R reason, again, that was what I was using as a God, had brought us so far. But somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we didn't like to lose our support. That last little, it's a leap of faith. Could there be a power? Right? We've already, just so you know, we did it. We've already crossed. We're new lands. Let's keep going. Let's make our third step decision and rock and roll. But if you're reading this alone, it's going to help us go over that bridge. It's going to help us answer that question. So the book is going to meet us where we're at and take us where we need to go, where it's like, oh, I don't know. That was natural. But let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith. So it's that idea, no, I can't have faith. I can't have faith. And it's like, hey, wait a minute. Aren't you here based on faith? This isn't what it's referring to, but aren't we reading this book based on faith? Didn't we show up to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous based on faith that there could be an answer there? We got faith. It said, and now this is what we're talking about, for did we not believe in our own reasoning? I got faith in my ideas. I think they're good ones. By the way, there's no evidence for me to have faith in my own reasoning, but here I am. And it said, did we not have confidence in our ability to think? We have faith in our ideas. And keep in mind, I mean, my ideas brought me back to the drink again and again and again. The mental obsession. It says, what was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful to the God of reason. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. So what we're seeing is that this idea that, oh, I could not have faith. Now bear with me. We're going to end on this paragraph. But this idea of faith, we come into AA, I can't have faith, I can't have faith. Now, I believe in our singleness of purpose. So I'm going to let you know this is not a first step proposition. This is a second step proposition. I'm throwing it out there. Bear with me. Has anyone here ever taken a floor pill? If you're unsure as to what a floor pill is, that is a pill that you found on the floor. Any floor pill takers? Yeah, my people, you know what's up. All I'm saying is, does that not require some faith? Anyone here ever taken a car floor pill? That's a pill that you found on the floor of a car? Oh, girl, you can make that amends. You can write that inventory. You know, it's not a lacking of faith. I am not a want of faith. It is direction. It is the direction in which I have orientated it. Now, bear with me if your experience is like mine. There was not a time in my life that I did not come to the capital P power that was alcohol with absolute faith that it was going to work for me, without absolute faith that it was going to relieve for me the way that I was feeling. Man, I had faith every single time in that power which is alcohol. So it is not that I don't have faith. It is just that I've got to reorientate it. And next week when we pick up, we're going to see not only did we have faith, but we were a little codependent. We were worshiping things. Oh, we had that faith dialed up to 11. And we'll check that out next week. So I'll turn it over to you, Vivian.